limitless souls, we've moved through the spark of individuality in Lyra. We explored structure and order in Vega. We expanded awareness through Andromeda. We grounded mastery in Sirius. We softened into integration through the Pleiadian heart. And now, we arrive at something different, something that isn't comfortable. The Orion Complex. And before we go any further, let's clarify something. This is not about mythology as literal history. It's not about the aliens or cosmic wars. It's about consciousness. In this series, the star systems represent stages of inner development. Orion represents polarity, the battlefield within the psyche, the tension between light and shadow, the part of awakening that cannot be skipped. And today, we're going to talk about why duality exists, why shadow emerges after heart integration, why spiritual growth often feels like internal conflict, and why true awakening requires the integration of both light and shadow, not the denial of either. Let's begin. After heart integration, many people expect peace. But what often happens instead? Conflict, right? You become more aware, and suddenly you see if you're jealous, if you need validation, your subtle manipulations, your anger, your superiority, your fear. The more conscious you become, the more contrast you see. And this is not regression. This is Orion. Polarity is not a mistake in consciousness. It is a function of individuation. Because when consciousness fractures from unity into individuality, it must experience contrast. And without contrast, there is no self-awareness. Light cannot know itself without shadow. Compassion cannot know itself without cruelty. Truth cannot know itself without distortion. Orion represents the stage where consciousness confronts the reality of its own fragmentation. Now, polarity is not evil. Polarity is instructional, but the problem arises when polarity becomes identification. Instead of seeing anger, you become anger. Instead of observing jealousy, you defend it. And instead of integrating fear, you project it. And that is where the internal war begins. Here's something people rarely admit. The shadow doesn't disappear when you awaken. It becomes more visible. For those who can relate to this one, you know what I'm talking about, right? Before awakening, shadow operates unconsciously. And after awakening, shadow becomes uncomfortable. Because now you see it. Now you can really feel it. You see the passive aggression. You see the comparison. You see the ego flare. You see the desire to be right. And you feel disappointed. Because why is this still here? Because awakening is illumination and not deletion. The Orion stage is where you realize that the work is not about becoming pure light. It's about becoming integrated. I know this is really hard when you're in this phase. I am currently in this phase right now. And I can say it's not easy. But yes, let's define shadow properly. Shadow is any part of us that we disown, the traits you suppress, the emotions you judge, the impulses you hide, the vulnerabilities you deny. If you suppress anger, it becomes shadow. If you suppress ambition, sexuality, weakness, it all becomes shadow. But shadow is not darkness. It is disowned energy. And Orion represents the confrontation with that disowned energy. Now let's go deeper. What you do not integrate internally, you project externally. This is where polarity becomes conflict in relationships. You criticize someone for being arrogant, but you suppress your own pride. You judge someone for being emotional, but you suppress your own vulnerability. You despise manipulation, but you subtly manipulate outcomes. Projection is shadow seeking recognition. Orion is not an external war. It is the internal battlefield mirrored in society. When consciousness refuses integration, it creates enemies. But enemies are often unintegrated reflections. So you can ask yourself, who triggers you the most? What traits do you strongly react to? And what might that reveal? In the Orion stage, consciousness often oscillates between two poles, victim and perpetrator. You feel wronged, you feel attacked, misunderstood, or you dominate, control, overpower, invalidate, sometimes within the same day, right? This polarity is not moral failure. It is unintegrated power. Power misused becomes control. Power suppressed becomes resentment. The Orion lesson is about power integration. Can you hold strength without domination? Can you hold vulnerability without collapse? Can you take responsibility without shame? That is integration. A spiritual superiority is shadow. Thinking you're more conscious, thinking others are asleep, believing you see what others can't. That is Orion in disguise. The ego reclaims identity through spirituality. Instead of I am better because I am successful, it becomes I am better because I am awakened. Orion reveals this subtle arrogance. True integration is humility, not self-deprecation. And it's not pretending you don't know anything, but humility rooted in self-awareness. You recognize your light, your shadow, and you stop pretending that you are the only one. Let's bring the nervous system into this. Trauma amplifies polarity. When the body has experienced threat, it splits experience into safe or unsafe, good or bad, us or them. Trauma narrows perception and awakening widens it. But if trauma isn't integrated, then awakening becomes destabilizing. You become hyper-aware, but not regulated. The Orion stage often feels intense because awareness increases faster than nervous system integration. This is why grounding practices or embodiment matters. This is why shadow work must be slow. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow. I have mentioned integration multiple times already since my past videos up until this video, because it is important when you stop fighting yourself, when you stop trying to be only light, when you stop condemning your shadow, when you stop identifying with either extreme, because you become spacious. You observe choose, respond, and the war ends internally before it ends externally. This stage prepares you for the final episode in this series, the return to pleroma. Unity consciousness is not naive bliss. It is integrated polarity. You cannot return to unity without confronting fragmentation. You cannot transcend shadow without integrating it. Orion is not the fall. It is actually the confrontation. If you feel internal conflict or tension between who you want to be and what still surfaces, or you feel disappointed in your shadow, remember that you are not failing. You are integrating, and this is the stage where awakening becomes very honest. It's not performative anymore, not aesthetic or conceptual, but fully embodied. And this is where real growth begins. Thank you so much for listening, Limitless Souls. I'll see you in the next episode.